If you were to ask people who are in a romantic relationship if they would prefer to be loved or respected, inside of that relationship, if you could only pick one, which would you prefer, love or respect? What you would find is that most of the time, not always, but most of the time, the answers would separate along gender lines. Meaning most of the men would say, well, I want to be respected. And most of the women would say, I prefer to be loved. Now, there's not a man in the world who doesn't want his wife to love him, and no woman ever asks to be disrespected. But there's something inside all of us, as men, crying out that says, respect me as your prince. And likewise, women are saying from the bottom of their heart that I want you to love and adore me as your princess. So let me ask you, the last time you were in an argument with your spouse, in the middle of that argument, were you more likely to have felt as if you were being disrespected or unloved? According to a recent survey, 83% of the men who were asked that question, 83%, said that the argument made them feel disrespected. And 72% of the women said that very same fight actually made them feel unloved. Now, I find those statistics to be fascinating for lots of reasons. One, they're just really impressive. 83 and 72, that's a high degree of probability. We cannot ignore that, and we'll get back to that here in a minute. But even more than the numbers, the reason why those statistics really speak to me, and I find them fascinating, is because of a very small Bible verse from the Christian tradition. And if you're not from that tradition, hear me out. I'll make my point in a minute to everybody. But this was written thousands of years ago. So I say again, each man must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. Now, what I want you to notice is that the words love and respect here are not offered as suggestions or maybe good ideas that you might want to consider. And they certainly don't have any conditions attached to them, right? They're not telling the men here, hey, you only need to be loving towards your wife when you think she's respecting you. And if you don't think she is, well, just sit down and let her catch up. He didn't say that. What he says is, man, you must love your wife. You have to act in a loving way towards her. And he even clarifies that you need to love her as much as you love yourself. It's very clear. And the same thing for the women. You're not given a condition to get out of it. You only have to be respectful towards your husband when you think he's being loving towards you. He doesn't say that. Now, on that note, I need to pause and kind of acknowledge the obvious. This can certainly be abused and manipulated. And if that's happened to you, I'm very sorry. If you're thinking of doing it, don't. Because that's not the intent here. This verse is not given to us for us to kind of pound our spouse into submission and get more of what we need out of them. It's the exact opposite. The conditions are left off of love and respect. It's presented unconditionally as a very practical way for us to draw closer to our spouse in a way that our relationship ultimately has more peace and joy. It's very practical, and I'll kind of start to wrap up with that. A psychologist by the name of Emerson Eggerichs wrote a book a while back called Love and Respect. If you've never heard of the book, or you've never read it, or even if you have, I want to give you a copy. The chapel has a bunch of them. In preparation for this marriage retreat, we went and bought a bunch of them, and they're over at the chapel. I've got some right here in my office here in Building 500. Come and get one. If I'm not here, just take it. I don't have to be at the chapel over there. You don't need me. Just go over there and say, I want a copy of the book, Love and Respect. I would love to give it to you because it's full of so much good stuff that can really take your relationship, your marriage to a better place. Whether you're in a good spot right now or you're kind of struggling, the book is just full of all kinds of powerful stuff, such as this. In the book, the psychologist describes something that he calls the crazy cycle. The crazy cycle is a pretty simple concept to understand, but it's very powerful. And it's something that all of us have done at one point or another that has really caused our relationship to spin out of control. Kind of goes something like this. Let's say a husband comes home around noon, and for whatever reason, he's in a bad mood. And he acts in a way or says something that doesn't come across as very loving to his wife. And so as a result of that, she reacts, maybe even instinctively without thinking about it, in a way that comes across, well, pretty darn disrespectful to him. Well, they part ways and spend some time thinking about that, and he gets pretty upset. So he comes back a couple hours later after really fermenting and feels like he has to double down and make his case. And when he does that, he comes across as even less loving than he was when he first came home at noon. He's really coming across as very mean and unkind. Well, that doesn't naturally encourage his wife to start acting in a respectful way. And so as you can see, they just continue to react off of one another, and the cycle just keeps spinning, and it wreaks all kinds of havoc on our marriage. So what do we do about it? How do we break the cycle and keep it from doing any more damage? Well, I want to offer two suggestions, and then we'll be done. The first one I'll say to those of you who are from the Christian tradition. If you're not from that tradition, hang on, I'll get right back to you. But if you are, we need to be reminded that these words, love and respect, are not conditional. And when we put a ring on in front of our God and our family and our friends, we are telling everyone, hey, I'm going to be sticking with this through the good and the bad. And so when the bad shows up next time in your marriage, remember, you promised that you were going to do the best you could to do the right thing, especially in those moments. It's not optional. But to all of us, I would say, regardless of where you fall on the issue of faith or the book of Ephesians, it doesn't really matter. The statistics can't be ignored. 83% of the men say they need to be respected. 72% of the women say they need to be loved. We have to hear that. Because that's not a woman saying that she wants to be loved. That's saying that she needs it. It's like air to her lungs. And it's not a man saying that I could probably thrive one day if I started to feel respected. No, it's much more powerful than that. We can't even survive without this basic feeling of being respected. It's that powerful to us. And so I'll close with this. As your chaplain, the next time you sense the crazy cycle starting to spin up in your marriage, I'm asking you to go first. To stop the cycle and say, you know what, I'm not going to wait for you to be loving or be respectful. I'm going to go first, and I'm going to give you what it seems like you really need right now. My prayer is that you would try that, and it would take you to a better place, and you would find more peace and joy down the road. Thanks.